Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the March 16th, 2022 Worcester Township Board of Supervisors business meeting. Would you please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? My name is Rick DeLello. I'm the chairman of the board. To my left is Lou Betts, who's our vice chair. Steve Quigley, who is our third member, is not available tonight due to a unavoidable conflict. So it'll just be Lou and I for what is a fairly light agenda. First and foremost, does anybody have any informational items for the board tonight?
Two, this evening's meeting is being video recorded for rebroadcast. And second, following this evening's meeting, the board will meet in executive session to discuss a matter of personnel, in specific possible professional services, professional consulting services, and no decision is expected to be made.
Thank you, Tommy. Next item on our agenda is public comment. We do ask that you limit your public comment to 5 minutes. Does anybody have any public comment for the board this evening? We'll start with you, Kim, and then we'll take you in the back, sir.
Good evening. Now, I was fortunate enough to hear a little bit about the benefits of the water tower that's proposed for the Technitool site. I take it you're familiar with that?
I am.
Oh, good, good. And it turns out that the property is going to be most likely taken by eminent domain. And in looking into this and through the discussion with the water company, it turns out that eminent domain can be used for taking land for water supply, transportation, and construction of public buildings. So, I'm suggesting that the township look into acquiring the Palmer property through eminent domain. I mean, we could construct a community center there, which is, something that would benefit all the residents of our township. It's an ideal location. It's the center point of the county. It would allow us to control the development that's going to take place on that property. If we owned it, we could, ensure that there's not a whole lot of commercial development or maybe no commercial development. I'd like to point out that it's not unprecedented. The water tower might be taken by eminent domain. Currently, our neighbors, in Gwinnett Township are trying to preserve 33 acres through eminent domain. So it's definitely, something that's other townships have used to preserve important tracts. And I just can't reiterate enough how important this tract of land is to our township. I really believe it makes a difference between, maintaining our, rural character and becoming just another township of suburban sprawl. So I'd like you to please consider that concept.
Okay. We appreciate your comments on that.
If there was a pen here, I'd write my name down, but there's not, so.
Uh-oh.
My name is Brian Threlfall, 2960 Fieldcrest Way.
Hey, Brian, can I ask you just to pull the microphone a little bit closer to you there, just so we get you on the recording, please?
Sure. Brian Threlfall, 2960 Fieldcrest Way, Worcester. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. My wife and I have been residents for Worcester for over 33 years. As a matter of fact, our daughter, son-in-law, and grandchildren moved in the last couple of years as well. We moved here because we were looking for the rural ambiance and the character of what Worcester represents, and we found that to be exactly true. Like many others, we were here because of that and because of the lack of commercial development. Commercial development is unavoidable in some way, no doubt, but that was one of the reasons that we were drawn to be here. So we highly value the open space that we enjoy in Worcester and greatly appreciate those residents who have contributed to the continuance of that open space as well. And it seems clear from the statements made here in the past and also from the resident survey that most residents, it seems, are in favor of more open space and less development, particularly less commercial development. And it seems that that would be more at the top of the list of, based on the evidence we have, of what most residents desire. In order to support the township with the ability to preserve more open space, we'd like to add our voices to those other residents who have suggested in the past that an open space referendum appears on the November election. A lot of other townships in the area have open space funding mechanisms in place, and we think it would benefit the township and its residents to do the same here. So I'd like you to consider that, and I want to thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Brian. Just so you're aware, and I don't know if anyone else in the audience, the open space referendum, our work session in April, that's the meeting we typically have before this one, has already been earmarked to have a conversation on that particular topic. So it's certainly something that we're considering and entertaining, and that's an opportunity where we're going to discuss it as a board in a public meeting as well.
I understand. My voice is simply to say that I think for my wife and I, her daughter and son-in-law, and I think a lot of other residents, we'd like to see that happen.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Susan? And actually, I think there was one on the back here as well. We'll get everyone.
Good evening. My name is Susan Smith, and our family farm is located at 3102 Fisher Road. I'd like to comment on two things tonight. When I talk with other residents about the situation at the Palmer property and the Palmer's desire to change their 55-acre property to be zoned all commercial, I'm usually asked, why doesn't the township buy that property? Well, I'm not completely sure the reason why that hasn't happened so far, but I believe that if the township had a dedicated open space fund, we would be in a strong position to buy that property and others that might come up like that. Imagine that property at the intersection of Valley Forge Road and Skipback Pike remaining green. Perhaps it could be made into a park where our residents could walk with their kids and their pets. Perhaps the old farmhouse could be, and the other buildings there could be converted to a community center where events and special gatherings could be held. But that requires, besides vision, money. I'm in favor of giving our residents an opportunity to vote on whether we should be assessed an earned income tax or a property tax, very small, 0.125% or 0.25%. That's an eighth of 1% to a quarter of 1%, very small. The township already has prepared a spreadsheet that lays out the funds that could be raised this way, and it could amount to about $500,000 a year. For an earned income amount, it would mean a family that earns $100,000 would pay $125 to $250, depending on which percentage is decided. That's a really small amount, and it will really add up once all of it is put into this open space fund. So I encourage the Board of Supervisors to reopen the discussion on this at our next work meeting, and I'm glad to hear that that's the plan. So thank you. Secondly, back to the Palmer property. I recently visited friends in Tarpon Springs, Florida. That is northwest of Tampa. It's a nice residential area. From what I understand, it used to be covered in orange groves. I couldn't help thinking about Worcester, though, as I drove down Route 19 there in Florida, which is now a continuous stream of commercial properties, one shopping center after another, with garish other commercial buildings and billboards in between. Inconsistent, unattractive, visual pollution, really. And it struck me that when those orange groves were gone, they were gone forever. And I wondered how many of their residents felt about that loss. I know our residents have told us by survey that their number one concern is open space, maintaining the rural ambiance of Worcester. It's why many have moved here and why many stay. Your support in keeping Worcester green and unencumbered by unwanted commercial growth, especially at the space of our center point, is needed and appreciated. Having our township attorney fight these type of variance applications is greatly appreciated. Let's not have to drive past that property and see a Best Buy or a big shopping center or a movie theater with a huge parking lot on that space and say to ourselves, it didn't have to be this way, and we can never go back. So please, please, let's protect that space. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. We appreciate your comments. So on this side, there were two, Winnie and then the woman in the back. Either one of you can go first.
Hello,
Hi.
I am Nancy Threlfall.
Hi, Nancy.
My better half preceded me.
I saw that. If you could just sign your name, that would be great. But normally it's the other way, Nancy. Normally it's the husbands that are saying their better half preceded them.
Actually, he just forgot to tell. I am here actually to read a statement
Okay?
by, that was written by Robert Fesnack. He could not be here tonight, and he asked me if I would read it for him.
Sure. Was that the email that Bob sent to us previously? Do you know? Is this want it read into the record?
I don't know.
Okay. Because he sent the board a
It was
letter.
it's dated March 15th.
That's fine.
Okay. My name is Robert Fesnack, and I live at 2203 Alabach Lane in Worcester Township. I've been a resident of Worcester for over 20 years. First off, I want to thank you for allowing me some time to discuss a topic I feel strongly about, and that is about open space and the possibility of adding an open space referendum to the November 2022 election ballot. I know that it has been previously discussed in other supervisor meetings over the past few years, especially in light of the December 2019 Conservation Finance Feasibility Study by the William Penn Foundation and the recent Worcester Resident Survey. I originally came to Worcester because of the open space, farms, recreational parks, walking trails, and access to nature in general. I would hate to see that change. In fact, we left Towamencin Township in 2001 due to increased housing density and traffic volume. Development of open space continues to occur. We continue to lose open space like golf courses to developers, and now the 55 acres of the Palmer property is at risk of being commercially developed. I believe we need to strike a healthy balance between development and open spaces. A revenue stream dedicated to acquiring land and development rights would go a long way to doing this. The resident survey of the most important issues in Worcester clearly shows that the top issues are preserving open space, followed by traffic volume. The top two reasons people like living in Worcester are open space and overall quality of life, respectively. I believe it is prudent for the Board of Supervisors to consider a referendum on this matter, not just because of the survey, but rather for the benefits that accrue to both the residents and the township. These benefits include maintaining the quality of life we are used to in Worcester, helping control stormwater runoff issues, raising property values which would more than offset any cost to residents, have less pressure on local resources such as fire department, township services, and postponing the need for a dedicated police force. Modify or maintain present volume, allowing Worcester to receive more grant funding and relieving pressure on raising other taxes. Based on these benefits, it appears to me that the cost of a dedicated revenue stream for open space purposes would be relatively insignificant. As you are well aware, there are various ways to fund this initiative. Some are through debt via bonds, property tax increases, or an increase in the earned income tax. All are voter-approved referendums. Many of the townships around Worcester have already passed referendums to accomplish this using either debt or a 0.25% increase in the earned income tax dedicated to open space. Each method has its pros and cons. My ask is that the board will be open to discuss further the viability of an open space referendum in the November 2022 elections. This would entail including this topic on the April agenda. Thank you, you said you had done that, and having follow-up meetings in the near future to discuss further. I am willing to participate in such meetings. The deadline in place, a measure of the ballot, is August 2022. As we continue to postpone a referendum, more open space will be developed and lost. I hope you will support not just me, but the majority of residents who support an open space funding plan. All I ask is to give the residents a chance to decide for themselves whether they want a dedicated fund for open space purposes. I appreciate your time. Thank you, Robert Fesnack. And I have to say, I agree with his sentiments. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Winnie?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Winnie Hayes. I live at 3033 Fisher Road in Worcester. I don't want to repeat what's been said. I just want to echo first that I agree with the comments that have been made. And I'd like to circle back to Kim's comments initially regarding the Palmer's property. And that's, is it possible to acquire that property through eminent domain for the benefit of all residents? So that's something to talk about and think about. What I want to talk about tonight is, I know in past discussions, before the COVID pandemic hit, the Board of Supervisors had basically said they'd support putting a referendum on the general election that at that time was supposed to be the presidential election in 2020. It didn't happen because of COVID, and clearly it made sense not to have it happen. I would like to suggest that we put it on this November's election, and it's not a presidential election, but I think it meets your criteria, Rick, that it's going to be a large turnout. There's no question that with both the Senate seat and the governor's seat open, and there's no incumbent running to keep that office, and with the division that's occurring between our political parties in this country, we're going to have a huge turnout at this election.
Okay.
So I'd like to really strongly encourage us to go ahead, craft a referendum, and let the residents decide, do they want a dedicated funding source for open space? So I'm glad you're going to have it on the agenda next month. I'll be there. I'm looking forward to that discussion. I also want to point out to Lou, I particularly appreciate as a new supervisor your statements supporting the value that open space has for residents in this township and your support for this volunteer fund. I do want to say, though it's a good idea, it's not a dedicated fund. It's not a predictable fund, and I don't think it will have the same kind of appeal to other organizations like counties or land trust or whatever that might be matching funds with us. I think there's a clear track record that a dedicated fund is more effective. So I look forward to that discussion next month. Thank you.
You're welcome. We appreciate your comments. Jim? Nice to see you came to visit.
I'm Jim Beam. I live in Locust Drive in Worcester, and I don't have much of a voice, so I'm really glad that we have a mic tonight. I will be very brief. I just want to add, I can't be here in April. I'm going to be away. And I think other people have stated the situation about the referendum very eloquently. I'd just like to add that I think it makes sense. I do think that it would be good to have it on the ballot in November and let the people decide and see what we do. We live in a very special place here in Worcester, and I think having the residents decide the direction that we should take going forward makes all the sense in the world. So, thanks very much.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate the comments. Does anybody else have any public comment for the board tonight? Okay, seeing none, we will move on. So we actually only have one main official action item tonight. It's a light agenda, as I said, and it pertains to our consent agenda. First and foremost, I'll ask Lou, do you wish to remove any items from our consent agenda tonight?
I do not.
Okay, then in that case, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda if you would like to make one.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda, treasurer's report, bill payment, and the business meeting minutes, February 16.
And just for the public record, that'll be the bill payments in the amount of $434,905.12. And I will second that. It has been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Next up is other business. I only have one item for other business, and it certainly pertains to sort of the public comments that we had tonight. Tommy, I know that you were pulling together some information for the board for our work session for next week, and I just want to make sure that you get those, that gets out to the board as quickly as you can do that. Yes. We circle back around to public comment. If anybody has any additional public comment they'd like to make for the board tonight. Seeing none. Oh, Susan. You can, but you need to come forward and...
I'm just kind of curious about, my name's Susan Smith, about the paperwork that I'm looking at.
Sure.
On the revenue and expenditures. And before I got to page 10, which is about as far as I've gotten so far, it just kind of seemed like most things were budgeted for more than what the prior year was expensed. Is it safe to say that the prior year was budgeted in a similar fashion as this year, but we just spent less? Or is there a reason why the budgeted amount is so much, or, you know, sort of consistently more than the prior year expenses?
I'm not sure I fully understand your question, but let me give you sort of, the budget is a year-round process every year. So ultimately, we're driving the budget based on actual expenses as well as what are anticipated expenses as closely as we can. But it's sort of a moving and living and breathing document. What in particular are you seeing that doesn't match a budget? I guess is, when you
Well-
start getting into the granularity that you're talking about.
No, I don't want to do that. It just seemed like as I was going through, a lot of the budgeted amounts were more than what the prior year expensed were. So I thought, well, if I ask that question, I wonder if they'll say to me, well, that's because it was budgeted that same amount last year, but we just spent less. But in addition to that, I'm wondering on page 10, there's like a really large $608,000 budgeted for a capital improvement, and I just was curious what that was, and also why our grants so much more this year, anticipated 1.5 million as opposed to last year 210,000.
Because sometimes we're receiving funding. So in terms of a grant, if we didn't receive the funding, say, last year, and this year we're anticipating, say, 750,000 that we weren't last year, then you would have a significant disparity on that particular line item. I'd have to dig into it to know sort of what makes up the exact amount. In terms of some of the other areas, capital improvements are driven. We have a long-standing sort of capital improvement budget that we work off of. So year to year, that certainly can vary by lots of amounts. And we also do transfers from the general fund. We use fund accounting, and I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of describing fund accounting, but you'll sometimes find transfers taking place from the general fund to our capital budget fund, just as good accounting practice. So sometimes you'll see those numbers look disparity, from year to year because of how the transfer might have been in a given year.
I'm just kind of curious, though, do you remember why the anticipated amount for grants is 1.5 million this year?
Well, Tommy, is that the federal money that we're getting as well?
A few sources there. The two biggest reimbursements anticipated for 2022 would be the $700,000 reimbursement for the Valley Forge Road Corridor Improvement Program, and also the reimbursement for the sound barrier. So those two grants alone total $1.7 million. We've received some of the funds, but not all for those projects. Grant funding is one of the variables in the budget. As the progress of the project moves forward, reimbursements are made after expenditures are made. So timing here can fluctuate depending on how quickly or how slowly a project moves forward.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. That helps.
Okay. Fair enough. Is there any additional public comment for the board this evening? Bert?
Good evening. My question has to do with the engineering report that's in our packet here. If you look at the engineering report, the one item down under E, under miscellaneous items, CKS continues to assist in work required in conjunction with the review and the approval of subdivisions and land developments and conditional use applications submitted to the township. These currently include the Palmer Tract, Huguenot property, and the Dubner property. I think everyone here is very familiar with what the proposals are for the Palmer Tract, and we've heard information about the Huguenot property, but not much about the Dubner property. Are you able to share with us what the proposal is for the Dubner property?
I don't have all the details on that, Bert. It hasn't come to our desk just yet, if you will. What did we get?
If I may, a copy of the plan has been posted to our website. So on our website, we maintain a list of active subdivision and land development applications. Those that are pending review for approval, those that were recently approved and yet to be constructed, and those that are under construction. So as soon as we get an application for a subdivision or a land development, we post that information on the website. So everything is on that page for view.
So the details are all out on the website is, I guess, the best answer I can give you, Bert, on that particular, but I don't, off the top of my head, have a lot of details that I can share.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any additional public comment for the board tonight? Okay, seeing none, motion to adjourn. Thank you all for coming.